you see yourself in that English high-tech tradition?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that I think it's a kind of bastard child of that English high-tech tradition, almost in the manner in which sort of, bits of Australian architecture are a bastard child of some kind of European functionalism. The idea that you sort of think about the way in which buildings relate to people from a holistic sense, but also the manner in which there's a relevance to considering building materials and the way that the building is built, and then the manner in which it engages with landscape or environmental systems. And so there's this notion of a shell, I suppose, which is then serviced for occupation. And my sense is that that's a kind of pure sort of British high-tech agenda. Now, on some levels it gets corrupted a bit by people like Cedric Price or Peter Cook, but there's still fundamentally an idea about how buildings are useful for people in a landscape, and I mean, I think that's what we're still doing.
Your work seems to be far more material-based than say, just an idea about high-tech or efficiency, rationalisation. How does your interest in materials manifest itself? How does that support a wider idea?
Well, I think the whole material discussion comes out of notions of parsimony in Western Australian architecture, where in the laminate catalogue that you get from the eastern states, there's sort of there's all the little chips of laminate that you can choose, and you'd get this catalogue with 20, 30 pages of these things, but back in Perth in the 90s, they'd have stickers on them saying not available in Western Australia. So this catalogue, there's probably about 6 that you can use.
Which can be a blessing sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the thing which is then quite interesting, if you kind of extrapolate that idea, is when you have a limited palette, you kind of learn how to use what it is that you've got in a very careful and strategic manner. And I think that's certainly something that drives my interest in a notion of how you seek opportunities within constraint. Now, that might be about a planning regulation or a client's brief,
or a budgetary one.
Or a budgetary one. But I mean, I think fundamentally it sort of engages you to begin to look at materials in different ways, rather than considering them as, what are we going to do today? It's very much about, okay, how do we extend this idea into this building and this building?
You raised Peter Cook before, who's someone you know. What's the influence that he's had on you? Because his work is very formally driven, very idea-driven early on as well. Is that something you've brought into your own work?
I think the fundamental thing that sort of studying under Peter Cook gives you is enthusiasm for what it is that you do. And when I was studying at the Bartlett, there was a kind of, a vast range of different people doing different bits of stuff, and he was able to shift and engage across that broad spectrum of everything from somebody making a film about the sky through to somebody sort of, doing incredibly intricate sort of drawings of blobby type stuff, through to somebody, making a denim jacket for their major project. And I suppose his enthusiasm for the pursuit of an idea was really the undermining thing that, that's the bit that I took away more than anything else. I think also Peter Cook's work can be deceiving because it looks formalistic and it looks like it's driven by a whole raft of quite complex issues. But the work in itself is actually relatively straightforward, and it's driven by quite provincial English ideas. Notions about dampness or the idea of providing a place for someone to play cricket, or the notion that when you look out of your window, what was there yesterday might not be there today. There's an idea about the whole notion, let's say, of instant city was a purely provincial idea that comes from Peter Cook's, I suppose, upbringing in Bournemouth. But then he was his father was a sergeant in the army that used to organise housing for the troops around Britain. So he went and actually, I think he went to something like 15 different schools. Went to a different school every year.
High level mobility.
Yeah, and another funny little town in Britain. So a lot of the work comes out of that experience of being in funny little towns in Britain, and the notion of the province versus the city. Now those sorts of ideas of coming out of a funny little suburb in Western Australia perhaps have some kind of resonance with where we come from in the work that we do. But certainly I think the idea of architecture being a social act and architecture being a social contribution as much as a cultural contribution is something which is very present in our work and things that we would like to do more of.